What if I told you that one of Europe's most distinctive, influential, and fiercely independent realms was born among rocky valleys, forged an empire at sea, and operated under a legal system that checked the absolute power of its own kings, centuries before such ideas became fashionable? This is the story of a kingdom forgotten by many, yet whose legacy still echoes in the identity, the art, and the law of modern Spain. This is the story of an empire built on pacts, not merely on conquests. This is the story of the Kingdom of Aragon. Our journey begins in the mountainous region of the Pyrenees, a wild, imposing, natural frontier between France and the Iberian Peninsula. At the dawn of the 11th century, the peninsula was a boiling cauldron. Christian kingdoms in the north, the mighty Muslim Al-Andalus in the south. It was the era of the Reconquista, a centuries-long period of conflicts, alliances, and complex cultural coexistence. Nestled in those valleys lay a tiny territory, the County of Aragon. It wasn't large, it wasn't rich, but it was resilient. Its lords were vassals of the kings of Navarre, a modest piece on the great Iberian chessboard. But in 1035, Awil changed everything. Sancho the Great of Navarre, on his deathbed, divided his vast realm among his sons. To his illegitimate son, Ramiro, he left the small county of Aragon. It wasn't a splendid gift. It was a modest inheritance, hemmed in by stronger, more ambitious neighbours, including Ramiro's own brothers. Yet Ramiro I did not possess the soul of a mere count. Royal blood flowed in his veins, and he hungered for majesty. He looked at his little mountain domain and saw not an end in itself, but the beginning of something grand. Through diplomacy, strategic marriages, and of course the sword, he began to expand his territory. He absorbed the neighbouring counties of Sobrarbe and Ribagorza, uniting the three old Pyrenean counties into a single entity. It was Ramiro who raised this collection of lands to the rank of a kingdom. Thus, the Kingdom of Aragon was officially born, a realm forged in the granite of the mountains and the iron will of its first monarch. Ramiro I died in battle, fighting to expand and consolidate his dream. He did not create an empire, but he planted the seed. He laid the foundation on which a far larger and more complex structure would be built. Aragon's story might have ended there, like so many other small medieval kingdoms. But fate and a succession crisis set the stage for one of Europe's most fascinating political arrangements. Decades later, Ramiro's grandson, Alfonso I, the battler, died without heirs. The kingdom plunged into chaos. To prevent Aragon from being swallowed by neighbouring Castile, Aragonese nobles made a desperate move. They recalled Alfonso's brother from a monastery. Ramiro II, known as the Monk, had no desire to rule. He was a man of God, not of state. Yet he did his duty. He married, and from that union came an heiress, a girl named Petronilla. At just 1 year old, she became the centerpiece of a brilliant political maneuver. Ramiro the Monk knew he needed a powerful ally to protect his daughter and the realm. He looked east to the prosperous County of Barcelona, ruled by Raymond Berenguer IV. What followed was an agreement, a casamiento en casa, a wedding contract stipulating that Raymond Berenguer would rule, but not as King of Aragon. He would be Prince of Aragon and Count of Barcelona. Petronilla, the monk's daughter, held the royal title and would pass it to their son. It was no longer just the Kingdom of Aragon, nor merely the County of Barcelona. It was the Crown of Aragon, a federation of territories. Imagine two companies agreeing to share the same CEO while keeping their own names, boards, cultures, and internal rules. Aragon kept its laws, its Cortes, and its traditions. Catalonia, the heart of the County of Barcelona, did the same. They were united in the monarch's person, yet distinct in administration. This unique structure, a union of equals, would be the key to the Crown of Aragon's expansion and complex identity. With domestic order secured and union with Maritime Barcelona assured, the Crown of Aragon turned its gaze to the sea. The Mediterranean, Mare Nostrum to the Romans, would become its playground, its fountain of wealth, its destiny. The architect of this expansion was one of Spain's greatest kings, James I the Conqueror, who reigned an astounding 63 years in the 13th century. James was no king who merely reigned from a lofty throne. He was a warrior who led his troops in person, a strategist who saw in the sea the future of his crown. His first major target was the Balearic Islands. Majorca, in particular, was a pirate nest menacing Catalan and Aragonese trade. In 1229, James assembled a vast fleet. The conquest was brutal, a reflection of the age, but strategic. With Majorca under his control, James ended the pirate threat and established a crucial base for commerce and future expansion. The Crown of Aragon was becoming a thalassocracy, a sea-based realm. But James's greatest conquest still lay ahead. The Kingdom of Valencia, a rich, fertile Muslim taifa to the south. The campaign was long and grueling, years of sieges and battles. In 1238, the city of Valencia finally fell. Yet James, showing remarkable foresight, did not simply annex the land. He established it as a new kingdom within the Crown of Aragon, with its own laws and institutions under his rule. The crown was now a mosaic of 3 realms: Aragon, Catalonia, Barcelona, and the newly created Kingdom of Valencia. The thirst for expansion didn't end with James I. His successors kept their eyes on the sea. The next great adventure led them to Sicily. In 1282, Sicily's population revolted against French rule in the bloody event known as the Sicilian Vespers. They offered the crown to Peter III of Aragon, married to a descendant of Sicily's old kings. Peter accepted. War with France and the papacy followed, but in the end, Aragon's flag flew over Sicily, another jewel in its Mediterranean crown. From there, the empire spread. Sardinia was conquered in the 14th century after a long, costly struggle against Pisa and Genoa. And finally, in the 15th century, Alfonso V, the Magnanimous, made his dream real by conquering the Kingdom of Naples in southern Italy. He even moved his court to Naples, governing his vast empire from Italy. By then, the Crown of Aragon was a powerhouse. From humble mountain origins, it now controlled an arc of territories across the western and central Mediterranean. Its merchant fleets, shielded by its war galleys, dominated trade routes. Catalan, Valencian, and Majorcan merchants could be found in Alexandria, Tunis, and Constantinople. Gold poured into Barcelona, Valencia, and Palma. Aragon had become an empire of islands and coastal cities. Yet what truly set the Crown of Aragon apart was not merely its empire, but the way it was governed. While much of Europe drifted toward absolutism, where the king's will was law, Aragon followed another path, a path of pacts and laws. That political philosophy was known as Pactism. The idea was straightforward. Royal power was no absolute divine right, but a contract, a pact between ruler and subjects. A king was king because the people, more precisely, the realm's elites, accepted him, and that acceptance hinged on his respect for the land's laws and privileges. This idea wasn't just theory, it lived through powerful institutions. First came the Cortes. Each realm in the crown had its own Cortes, an assembly representing the 3 estates: nobility, clergy, and urban citizens. The king had to summon the Cortes for money or new laws, and the Cortes could say no. They bargained hard with the monarch. We'll grant this subsidy, they might say, but in return, you must redress these grievances and confirm these privileges. It was a system of checks and balances in the heart of the Middle Ages. The legal bedrock of it all was the fueros, compilations of each realm's laws, customs, and privileges. They were sacred. When a new king ascended the throne, his first duty was to travel to each of his realms and solemnly swear to uphold their fueros. There's an oath formula, perhaps apocryphal, capturing the Aragonese spirit. We, who are worth as much as you, but together are worth more than you, make you our king and lord, provided you keep our fueros and liberties, and if not, not. If the king broke the oath, the people had the right to resist. To ensure no one, not even the king, stood above the law, Aragon created an almost unique institution, the Justicia de Aragon. The Justicia was no ordinary judge. A nobleman, he served as ultimate arbiter in conflicts between king and nobility, or among nobles themselves. He was interpreter and guardian of Aragon's fueros. His authority was immense, embodying the law's supremacy over brute power. A king could not, for instance, imprison or execute an Aragonese noble without the Justicia's consent, a medieval prototype of a supreme court, a bulwark against tyranny. Throughout its history, notable kings sat on Aragon's throne. Peter IV, who reigned in the 14th century, was called the Ceremonious. The name fit, obsessed with majesty, ritual, and dynastic history. He forcibly reincorporated the Kingdom of Majorca under direct crown control, punishing relatives' disloyalty. He was a meticulous administrator, a centralizer within Pactist limits, who strengthened royal bureaucracy and left detailed chronicles of his reign. He personified Aragon's self-consciousness as a great, ancient dynasty. Then, in the 15th century, we reach one of Spain and Europe's titanic figures, Ferdinand II of Aragon. Nicknamed the Catholic, Ferdinand epitomized political savvy, a brilliant diplomat, military strategist, and master of power games. Aragonese to the core, reared in the Pactist tradition, his vision reached beyond his crown's borders. That vision met its match in an equally formidable woman, Isabella I of Castile, heir to the peninsula's largest, most populous realm. Their marriage in 1469 changed the world's map. The union of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, marked Spain's birth as we know it. Together, they completed the Reconquista, with Granada's fall in 1492. That same year, they backed a Genoese navigator named Christopher Columbus, opening the door to a new world. They unified foreign policy and forged a shared identity. But it's crucial to grasp what that union meant for Aragon. It was not a merger. The Crown of Aragon did not disappear. It was, again, a dynastic union. Ferdinand remained King of Aragon, ruling by its laws and institutions. Isabella was Queen of Castile. They were monarchs of two distinct realms. Aragon kept its Cortes, its Justicia, its coinage, its fueros. The Mediterranean Empire continued to be managed from Aragon and Catalonia. The vast new American Empire, however, was a strictly Castilian enterprise. Spain was united in practice, yet still plural in constitution. That delicate balance lasted another 2 centuries under the Habsburg kings, who followed Ferdinand and Isabella. But the world was changing. The absolutist, centralized state, embodied by France's Sun King, was becoming the norm. And the Crown of Aragon's medieval federal system seemed, to some, a relic. The Kingdom of Aragon approached its twilight. In 1700, the last Habsburg king of Spain, Charles II, died heirless. His will named a French prince, Philip of Anjou, grandson of the mighty Louis XIV, as successor. Philip V's accession unleashed a Europe-wide conflict, the War of the Spanish Succession. On one side stood Philip V and France, defending a centralized absolutist monarchy. On the other, a grand alliance led by Austria, England, and the Netherlands backed Archduke Charles of Austria, fearing excessive French power. Spain split. The Crown of Castile largely sided with Philip V, but the Crown of Aragon's territories saw the French model as death to their traditions. They rightly feared a Bourbon king reared at Versailles would have no patience for their fueros, Cortes, and Pactism system. They staked everything on Archduke Charles, who promised to preserve their ancient laws. They chose the losing side. The decisive Spanish battle came at Almansa in 1707. Philip V's forces crushed the Austrian army. With military victory secure, Philip showed no mercy. Between 1707 and 1716, he issued the Decrees of Nueva Planta. They were, in essence, the death certificate of the Crown of Aragon as a political entity. The decrees abolished the fueros and institutions of Aragon, Valencia, Catalonia, and Majorca. The Cortes were dissolved. The Justicia de Aragon was extinguished. The legal system was replaced by Castilian law. The Crown of Aragon, a federation of realms that had lasted over 600 years, was dismantled, its territories formally folded into a centralized, unified state, the Kingdom of Spain. The kingdom was gone. The empire unraveled. Its laws were erased from the statute books. The story of the Kingdom of Aragon is a saga of ambition, innovation, and ultimately tragedy, how a small mountain county grew into a sea-spanning empire. Today, Aragon is an autonomous community within Spain, bearing a flag whose red and gold bars once fluttered on galleys that conquered Sicily. Its history reminds us that modern Spain is no monolith, but a mosaic of ancient kingdoms and identities.